Good morning. In my ongoing battle to be thankful instead of grumbling, I'm really thankful this morning that my snowblower started on the first pull because I gave it a really solid workout. On this first day of November, we're continuing our look through Peter's letter, his first epistle, First Peter as we know it as in the Bible. And I've entitled my talk, as we come to chapter 3, I've entitled my talk, Two Words That Belong Together. There's a couple different senses to that, couple meanings to that title. Two words that belong together. I mention sometimes that I have a passion for giving practical definitions to theological words. I've come to believe that I don't truly understand theological words unless I'm able to define them in simple terms. And that lack of understanding leads to theological words having little impact in our lives. There are two words about which I want to talk today. One of these two words we welcome and feel good about. The other word often feels oppressive and is sometimes illicitly weaponized in order to oppress certain categories of people. Why would I connect two seemingly contrary words? On the one hand, it's because we can't properly understand either word apart from the other, and on the other hand, a correct understanding of these two words enables us to function as community in a positive way. The first word I want to talk about is the word harmony. In our look at Peter's first letter, we come to chapter 3, and in the middle of chapter 3, we encounter these heart-calming words. Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. That's the kind of entreaty that sums up the kinds of attitudes which are required for people to function as community, to live in harmony. If you encounter a group of people who practice unity of thought, sympathy, love, compassion, and humility, I can safely predict that you have found an interpersonal utopia that is the relational equivalent of a masterful symphony. If only life could be that simple. In most of our English translations of 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, we don't see the word harmony, but my trusty Greek lexicon tells me that the word translated like-minded could also be translated harmonious. In fact, older editions of the New International Version, which I tend to use, did use the phrase live in harmony. Harmonious is that wonderful word which depicts the very best within relationships. Harmonious is what we want, whether we're talking about a hockey team, a town council, a workers' union, a church, a romantic relationship, a friendship, a family, and of course, any kind of musical group. As a further amplification of how a harmonious life works, Peter made this additional comment in which he included a quote from the 34th Psalm. This is what he wrote. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called so that you may inherit a blessing. And then he goes on to quote from Psalm 34. For whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. The Bible wants us to know that our God loves harmony. Harmony is something we can enjoy without even knowing what it is. Long before I had any inkling of how musical harmony worked, I knew as a child that I liked the sound of the Statler Brothers Country Music Quartet. I further learned that people have different tastes in harmony, and I was eventually forced to accept that no one among my family and friends shares my appreciation for the Statler Brothers. But there is a big difference between varying tastes in harmony and not making harmony. When I was a young Bible college student, I became friends with a very musical fellow who, like me, was from a grain farm and who, unlike me, drove a brand new Chevy pickup truck. Being a prankster, he had upgraded his truck by connecting two very loud and not harmonious horns. He loved to roll up behind other students and startle them with a blast of his hideous sounding horns. With his deep bass voice, he would give a booming laugh and proclaim, "Dissonance plus." Dissonance is not only what makes people with a good sense of musical pitch grimace and want to plug their ears. Dissonance can actually make people jump in terror. Attaining harmony, whether we're talking about cohesiveness within a hockey team or the sound of a band we enjoy, is more complicated than simply having an absence of dissonance. When Peter wrote his letter, he connected the concept of harmony to another word, the one we find oppressive. In my previous talk, I pointed out that Peter mentions this word more times than any other single New Testament document. Can you guess what it is? It's the word submit. Why would Peter talk about harmony in the middle of a lengthy discussion in which he uses the word submit 5 times? And why does it feel like dissonance to talk about harmony and submission in the same context? Quite simply, I think it's because we don't understand the word submission. We associate submitting to all kinds of negative relational dynamics like oppression, hierarchical rule, patriarchy, dominance, and even abuse. Women particularly dislike the word submit because they feel like they have been made victims of that word within religious circles. Submission ends up feeling suspiciously like losing. But is the word submit really about losing and oppression? Not according to Peter. The reason Peter talked about harmony and submission in the same context is that harmony depends on submission. Submission is what a band conductor is asking for when she or he stops the band and points out the one instrument that is out of tune, or the instrument which is too loud or too soft, or the instrument that is not being played in the proper tempo. Making musical harmony depends on each instrument and voice submitting to each other. Submission is what happens on a hockey team when each player sticks to their assigned position in setting up a play. Submission is what happens in government when an individual council member or MLA or MP gives up their personal preferences for the good of the community. You can't have harmony without submission. Just as important, and maybe even more important, I'm not sure, submission has the power to bring about harmony. Peter highlighted the power of submission to bring about harmony in the context of marriage. He began chapter 3 by writing, "Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that, if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won. They may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives." Now, we need to be a little careful with Peter's words because there is a fine line between submission and manipulation. This is not talking about manipulation. Manipulation is pretend submission. People who manipulate act as if they are promoting harmony, but after they win what they want, their submission is revealed to be false. Because we despise manipulation, we can fail to notice that there is a legitimate connection between the word submit and the word won. W-O-N, won, winning. Submission is a winning word, not a losing word. According to Peter, wives who submit win the favor of their husbands. They gain harmony, we could say. Husbands also win if they practice submission. We could wish that Peter would have used the word submit in regards to husbands, but he didn't. I think, though, that he was talking about husbands submitting, because he wrote, "Husbands, in the same way," with reference to submission, "husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers." Within the context of Peter's words, the phrase "in the same way" is clearly a reference to submission. Husbands who are considerate to their wives and treat them with respect, who submit to their wives, in other words, are also winners. And just in case anyone would assume that submission is an invitation for abuse, Peter was careful to admonish husbands to treat their wives with respect as the weaker partner. That word weaker has nothing to do with hierarchy or patriarchy, and everything to do with physical strength. Most domestic abuse is committed by men because they are often physically stronger than women, and that's exactly what Peter was careful to speak against. Men who use their physical strength to oppress women won't have their prayers heard because God does not tolerate abuse. Submission in the Bible turns out to not be a negative word, but a positive word because it empowers harmony. And if men ever use the word submit as an excuse to abuse women, they are guilty of having abused a word that is meant for good. The association between submission and winning is illustrated in these words from James, the physical brother of Jesus, who wrote, submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." That's in James chapter 4, verse 7. By submitting to God, according to James, we become empowered to win against the devil. Or we could say, being in harmony with God makes us winners when it comes to the devil. Now, as a society, we are in a situation currently where these two words, submission and harmony, have become especially significant. All of us are suffering from COVID fatigue. And we all know that fatigue makes us irritable. It was one thing to endure restrictions when we thought we were dealing with a 2-week disruption. But that 2-week disruption has long passed the half-year mark. And if fatigue makes us irritable, the uncertainty of how long the pandemic will last only heightens that irritability. Not only do we face the personal disruption of unwelcome restrictions, but we also face the fear that COVID can strike us personally or strike people we know and love. And we can have fears about wondering, how are we going to make it through all of this? How are we going to deal with the financial implications, with the educational implications, the relational implications? How will we choose to respond to the restrictions and uncertainties that are put upon us? Will we lash out in frustration? Or will we submit to compliance? Our reactions will determine whether we promote harmony or dissonance. There's one feature of harmony and dissonance that we cannot avoid. Dissonance is impossible to hide. One dissonant instrument can be heard above an otherwise harmonious orchestra. One dissonant voice can be heard above the otherwise harmonious voices of a large choir. People cannot help but notice if I am harmonious or dissonant.